One of the processes that I think was incredibly important in the early days of the Transition Town Totnes project were the open spaces that we did. And I think it's a question that I have, that if you don't do something, I think doing open space is incredibly bold. It's just not really what we're used to doing in our communities. It's kind of opening our project up and welcoming anyone who comes into the room to say, you can be a part of this project, start a conversation, and if you fit in with the general ethos of what we're doing, your project will become a part of transition. So in open space, what you do is you put out a big question. So the question was often something like, how can Totnes feed itself beyond the age of cheap oil, was the food open space question. And I can't remember what the actual question was. We did an inner transition open space where we asked something like, how can we support the inner dimension of the transition to a sustainable future, something like that. So then you start with a big circle, everyone who's walked in through the door, and it's up to the people in the circle to make an offer to host a conversation. So you have a big matrix with lots of tables and 3 time slots through the day, and you have a marketplace where people put up their offers of hosting conversations into this, big grid of table numbers and time slots. And that's what designs the whole structure of the day. So it's an incredibly creative, invitational, generative space. So out of the other, for instance, from the food open space, we noticed that Rob had a look back at the notes that he took on the day, and he saw that of those original projects, most of the things that they'd visioned and talked about had happened. And they hadn't happened because anybody had managed them or been on their case about their timelines or their deliverables. They'd happened because there was so much energy and enthusiasm at that first meeting that it carried the project through into reality. In the inner transition open space, we did something a little bit different. So we both invited conversations and we offered space for practitioners to give a little taster session of what they saw as being part of inner transition. So there were some people offering a kind of seasonal celebration, somebody offered short meditation, somebody did, I think there was a little Joanna Macy kind of work that reconnects process. So it was also a little taster of some of the pieces that we saw being part of the inner transition kind of smorgasbord, variety of offerings. And at the end of the open space day, when everyone's done all of their different things, again, we'd always ask people to make some kind of record of what happened, and then you have a big circle where you might hear back just a minute from each of the tables that's had a conversation, so you get a sense of a sort of collected journey. And then type, if you can find somebody with the time and energy to type up all of those, so it also can be made available as a kind of community conversation. So yeah, I think open space is a really, really important tool, and if you haven't facilitated it yourself, it's great if you can find somebody with some experience in facilitating it. So you can find more information about open space if you Google open space, you'll find it on the Harrison Owen website. He's the person who developed it. He's written a book. There are trainings in open space run by organisations like the Art of Hosting. And there is a very short 3-minute video on how, just the very bare essentials from the very first Transition Network conference that you can find on YouTube. So some of the other structures that we've used when we've run events, we've had several fishbowls in Totnes. That sound a bit odd, but it's basically a structure where you can have as many as 35 or 40 people in a room, and it's an invitational kind of discussion because anybody can contribute to what's being said, but rather than trying to facilitate all 40 people, you create an inner ring of chairs. So there's just 5 chairs, for instance, in the middle, and the conversation takes place between those inner chairs. So people can come in and be part of the conversation, and when the bit they're interested in is completed, they go back and sit out in the wider circle. So there's a set of kind of instructions that help the facilitation of that, for that to be a safe and inclusive space. It's been written up in one of Rob's books. I think it's in the Transition Handbook. But if you Google those structures, if you search online, you'll also find instructions for how to lead fishbowls, for instance, World Cafe, Open Space, all of these technologies that are about inviting people into different kinds of conversation.